talk about the private schools now getting public funding. You know, obviously, Tyler, you've been all in on your show. We've done, I think, a pretty good job of getting out to people to change some of these votes, and I think we have, just not enough.
Well, and hearing from lawmakers that they're annoyed from hearing from you.
Right.
But that's when I want to double down. Yeah, it's part of the job.
I had one say, mine never gets back a hold of me. Lurk never even emails back. Tyler Axness is in the studio, host of Afternoons Live here in the eastern section of the News and Views Radio Network. How you been, buddy?
Doing well.
You and I were in those chairs. We sat in the North Dakota Senate, and this time of session, I just kept looking at my watch going, when's this over?
Yeah, conference committees, and I'm not sure how it was when you were there, but the House members always had to run it back up to leadership.
Well, after when I was there, we had to park our horse first.
Rope it up,
exactly.
Saddle it up, and it finally got to the point because, like you say, you're just okay. When can we be done here? We're on day 78, and we finally just said, you know what? If you're waiting on Al Carlson to make the decision, just send him down to the conference committee. Actually, we don't need to wait anymore.
And Al was the leader, I think, at the very end of my tenure, and we had Wes Belter before that, and Wes was only in 1 year, and I think that people realized that he didn't have what it took to do the job, and his own caucus said, Wes, this was a good run, go away. But before that was a guy named John Dorso, and John would appoint himself to the committees.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He'd walk in that room. You'd sit there for 2-3 days, hammering these things out, looking at them as the minority party and go, just agree. This isn't that big of a deal. Dorso would walk in, sit down, call the meeting to order. He'd make a motion. Somebody like me would second it. Boom, done. Gone. It'd be like, oh, you guys got took to the woodshed.
The way it ought to be sometimes. Instead of that blank stare. Well, we've got to run it back upstairs.
Yeah, exactly. So I know one of the things you're tracking and following is the people of North Dakota's, let me give my opinion first through my voice, public dollars that could be going to public education and public landowners, property taxes going to private schools. And this is still alive, is it not?
Oh, yeah. We're just talking about the conference committees. This one's not even going to get one of those. House Bill 1532, which was the private school voucher bill, the Senate amended it down to $10 million instead of the 24 the House approved earlier. And the House, I'd say about 20 minutes ago, said, sure, just concurred with the Senate, and so this is going to Burgum's desk. So now it's up to Governor Doug Burgum whether or not this gets signed or vetoed.
Here's what's wrong in all this. If you folks that have been calling in and writing in and going to the meetings, don't let the reduction in the dollar amount confuse what the bigger issue is here. Remember when they gave major tax breaks to oil? They did. They reduced by billions of dollars the amount of revenue that North Dakota would have got to the oil industry, but yet on the very top of it, they left that trigger so that when the oil companies were making buku bucks and oil was up to $90-100 a barrel, then they still had to go back to paying the old tax rate. They got rid of that this time. Did. So when they get this money for private schools, it may be $10 million this year. It's going to be, look at that. We've always done this. We've done this for 2 years. I mean, all they want is the camel's nose under the tent.
The slippery slope, so to speak, of taxpayer dollars, your public funds, you rural residents listening on the News and Views Radio Network that don't even have a private school, anywhere within 45 an hour drive from you, you're going to be paying someone else to send their child by choice to a private school.
Yeah. And that private school that doesn't have to take some of the toughest cases in the world to have to deal with in education.
No strings attached to this $10 million. Here's the check. I'm going to sign it. And you know what? We're not even going to bother to have you report back on this, and this. You don't get that luxury as a public school.
Yeah.
You don't.
When you look at some of the vote totals on this, it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't like it was a landslide victory like the Republicans. It was all Republican that voted for it. I get that. They're the ones pushing for those private school dollars, those public dollars go to private schools. That being said, what I'm trying to get at here is if the governor vetoes this, if you look at the vote totals, they're not there to to sustain the to override the veto.
No.
They'll be able to sustain the veto.
In fact, the House just this morning, 51-41. I mean, that's pretty evenly split right now. And here's what I can put this towards. Because everyone listening decided to send those emails. I know of people that were out at hotels, which you're familiar. I mean, that's where you're staying for those 4 months, of senators complaining that they got 600 emails on this bill alone, House Bill 1532. So they're hearing it. And I have no doubt if Governor Burgum does issue a veto, it will be sustained.
There's another factor to this, and I'm going to use my local senator as the example because I think people don't always understand the process and how it works. Wayne Stenjum told me this when he was back in the North Dakota Senate because I was talking about, floor speech and this and that. He said, Joel, on any big vote, and this is a big vote, he said, the people know what's going to happen before you ever go to the floor. Have all the floor speeches you want. You're not going to change anybody's mind. Right. It's decided. When you have, in my particular case, you have a legislator that in the Senate, and Larry Lueck, that didn't take it on. And then you've got a caucus big enough so that at the very end, you can say, all right, I'm going to take this one. You take that one. I got to have my back here. I got to get, that type of thing. Then you can vote no, even though you voted yes. Mm-hmm. Right. You can sit there and say, I was president pro tem of the Senate. Well, then you're supposed to have enough power to reverse some of these guys. Right? Yeah. I mean, you're part of that caucus. Yeah. Turn it around or else don't brag about being a leader.
Well, yeah, and here's another thing that changed in the Senate, that in the arguments that we've made on the school lunch program, $6 million, you heard from people like Mike Wobema out of Valley City, newly elected, saying, I get kids are hungry. If they choose to eat, then it should be the parents' responsibility.
Yeah. Why the same Mike Wobena who had the military for years feed him. Right?
The same Mike Wobena that turned his back on somebody providing an opening prayer, turning his back on kids. That same Mike Wobena from Valley City.
They believe in prayer.
Well, his bogus argument that, the Fed set the rate at 130% poverty. Why would we go above and beyond to feed these kids? Mike Wobena, that same guy, voted for this proposal that would set the poverty rate in North Dakota at 500%. Of poverty, so going well above and beyond what the Fed set. That equates to a family of four at $150,000. That's now eligible for this voucher. The 130 that was there originally, up to 200 for those hungry kids. Family of four, like $65,000. So a family of four at 150 can qualify for the private school voucher, but if you were at 65 in a family of four, you don't get any assistance from Mike Wobena.
So let me throw this at you and play devil's advocate here because you know where I'm at. That should have been passed. But for those individuals who are going to say, hey, show me the school where kids didn't get a hot lunch, what's been your answer to that?
Well, it varies from district to district. I was visiting with the individual that was the nutritionist out of Bismarck, said it comes down to whatever that school is able to finance. And it might not be that cheese sandwich. It might be that they do get that hot lunch, but, they're still going back and going into debt at some point. Mm-hmm. So, you can probably find at least a couple out there that have to do this just because of the lack of resources.
We wouldn't have been talking about it on News and Views if it hadn't been for a school cook coming to me and saying, look, this needs to get fixed.
I talked to a cook on the northern side of the valley on this very issue who is in one of those school districts that you have a separate and it's not equal lunch that would be provided, and she just refuses to do it. So God bless her for saying, I'm not going to give this kid a brown paper bag. They're going to get the same thing. But at the risk of potentially losing your job if anybody decides in a school board or in the administrative that, look, that's not how we're playing this. Thankfully, they haven't done that yet.
Well, okay, so what is your answer when they say, look, it's already in the budget, that we don't need to address it separately, that there's enough money in the school's budget to do it?
Which one are you talking about?
A hot lunch.
Well, it's not. It's not in the budget because that's the answer. I mean, right now you are now sending out collections to families who are taking on debt because they might be a couple bucks short from qualifying, and then you're spending more money at times trying to reclaim that debt than what the debt's even worth.
Yeah.
And that came from Congressman Kelly Armstrong on the federal side when I asked him, you guys proved you can do this during COVID. Why let that lapse, and why not just pick that up on the federal side here? And To my surprise, he said, yeah, that's something that I'm actually coming around to considering.
I remember when I was there, it's about 10 a week. I mean, you get 10 invites a week. There's only 5-6 nights you can be there. But there are a lot of invites to a free steak dinner.
There's a lot of buffets. There's a lot of meals provided, and we created an ethics commission trying to limit some of that. You know what? There's a roundabout here that I learned about that if you provide an educational opportunity. So you could go to the Peacock Alley. You could go into that back Langer room, whatever it is called now. You could pick any lobbyist. We'll just go with the North Dakota Petroleum Council. They got pretty deep pockets here. We'll go back there and, we'll put up a PowerPoint on the wall back here that shows you some of the educational opportunities, and you can justify providing more meals that way. So they found an end around these lobbyists and lawmakers of the Ethics Commission of saying, you know what, you got to report this. It was educational. This was not some, lobbying thing.
So we don't have to report it.
Yeah. So they're getting their free meals, and they're now getting a higher reimbursement from us.
Remember when Keith Kempnich was mad because during COVID, the lobbyists weren't there doing all this, and he said he had to eat a can of SpaghettiOs once?
Yes.
Where this is all going, we talk about the private schools now getting public funding. Obviously, Tyler, you've been all in on your show. We've done, I think, a pretty good job of getting out to people to change some of these votes, and I think we have, just not enough.
Well, and hearing from lawmakers that they're annoyed from hearing from you.
Right.
But that's when I want to double down. Yeah, it's part of the job.
I had one say, mine never gets back a hold of me. Lurk never even emails back. Want to throw this out to you, and I don't think I'm being rude. This is a public phone too. 328-2200. 328-2200. That's Governor Burgum's front desk, and the ball's in his court now.
It is.
You got to get a hold of Doug Burgum, and you got to get him to veto this bill.
Well, and knowing some of his former staff are administrators in public education, I imagine there's some phone calls being made.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I have no idea. I've been surprised in some of the things that have been vetoed. I've been surprised at some of the things he signed into law. This one I don't know. When I'm looking at 51-41 in the House, knowing that the talk of this legislative session, because you as listeners have contacted them, this is a hot issue. And if you take some of that passion and you start calling that number to the governor's office, I think you could have a sway on this one.
So there's been this strategy by the Kirsten Baslers of the world, which is, I know that she's not for public dollars going to private schools. I know that about her, or at least I certainly hope that about her. But I'm fairly confident that's her position. She wouldn't go public about it. I asked her directly on this show to just yes or no, and she danced around it, right? Is it time for her to come out of the closet and just say, listen, Doug, veto this bill,
it's
and just say
time.
it publicly?
Completely past time. I know that the administrators and the school board members across the state have done their job. She's a part of that. She's the head of public education in the entire state of North Dakota. It's long past time for Kirsten Basler to come out and say what she's probably saying behind that closed door. I don't know when the level of fear of this legislature got to be the height of these people that were also duly elected from the entire state, that they're too afraid to come out and say what they're saying behind those doors. It's past time.
I know that you worked with Kelly Armstrong, that he's somebody that's on your show frequently, and I always found him to be pretty forthright in terms of answering questions you may not want to answer on my show. But do you think he's running for governor?
Yeah. If Doug Burgum is diving into the presidential, or whenever he gets termed out, whatever it might be, that vacancy will be there. Kelly Armstrong moved to Bismarck from Dickinson. You don't like Bismarck that much, but he's looking at that. He would rather be in North Dakota so he can hunt and then go out to the oil patch and do whatever it is instead of being out in Washington.
Do you think Doug Burgum will hit the national stage? He went down to Iowa to begin a presidential run. 4 people showed up. Yeah,
and money's not going to buy charisma. And that's what you need on that big of a stage. You need to have people rally around you. I don't care how many millions of dollars. It's not going to buy you what you need to get into the race and actually be a legitimate contender.
There's all of these people that they're talking about going, hey, Tim Scott and this person, they went to Iowa, or this person went to New Hampshire, and oh boy, Nobody did that with Doug. I'm sorry. It's got to get some national attention before that's going to work. Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate it. You can hear him every afternoon from 2 to 5 here on the Mighty 790 KFGO. Back with your calls and text messages right after this.